Welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage, everyone. I have in front of the camera here a sewing machine carrying case, and inside I have a machine I'm going to show you. This is the purchasing series. Is basically when I make little short videos just to let you guys know what I've recently found. And I do this because I have not begun the overhaul reconditioning process for this machine, but I like to show it as I find it because maybe it can help some of you who are looking for machines, or whether you just want one to sew with, or you're maybe going to get into sewing machine restoration yourselves. But when I first saw this machine, I kept looking at it, and it is from the 1950s, but this machine in particular is interesting because some people might say it looks like a jukebox, or it might look like a pachinko game. Pachinko, P-A-C-H-I-N-K-O, is a game that comes from Japan. If you've ever seen one, they make them for children. They used to sell them for children here. In Japan, they have pachinko parlors, and it looks, to us, it might look like a pinball machine, but vertical. But the reason I mention things like pinball machines and jukeboxes is because even though we know a lot of products from the 50s have lots of glitz and embellishment, I thought I would show this one to you guys because I saw this and I was imagining all of the products that people would buy in the 1950s. And if you look at cars, at appliances, television sets, stereos, they're all heavily embellished with all kinds of chrome and metallic finishes, and I mean, they just get really styled up. You can see, of course, this brand, by the way, is the Arrow Stitchmaster. Arrow was a brand of sewing machines during the vintage era, and many of the Arrow machines were made by Toyota, as were many of the machines under the brand name Morse. So Arrow was not a sewing machine maker. They were a sewing machine distributor, right? There were people who wanted in on the business. This is after the Second World War. People are, the population is booming in North America. People are the economy's booming, and there's a lot of competition. And you will see this model is sort of a silver, it's a metallic silver, sort of a graphite gray color, two-toned. And then you have gold tone with the red logo here for with the Arrow branding, and of course it has a coat of arms. Remember, many of these brands, they were trying to show that they had gravitas, because some of them were new to people. You'll see here this little star emblem. You see this a lot in the 50s. You'll see it on appliances. You see it on cars, and it's sort of a space age looking star. Talking about the machine itself, of course, it has, in addition to the two-tone color, it has chrome, it has gold tone chrome, and it's one of the most embellished machines I've come across. I bought it because I try to keep in my inventory at least some machines that that can perform zigzag stitches. Now, of course, zigzag came into being in the late 40s, early 1950s. It was not a new feature in industrial machines. It had been around for a very long time. But in home machines, it was new. And the Necchi company, the Italians, were one of the first to introduce it. And of course, the Japanese came in and started designing machines that could do the same thing. Sometimes they would take over expired patents. But what you see here, of course, is tension adjustment on the tension dial. Up front, you have a lever. It almost looks like a pinball machine flipper. You have a lever, and notice that I can move the lever to different lengths and widths of zigzag. And over here you have stitch length control. Now, one of the things I do, and I've mentioned this to you all before, but I like to repeat this, is that when I get a machine, I first get it home, I'm going to kind of gauge what it's doing. How much movement is there? Sometimes the machines move really well. So, for example, if I reach over and grab the hand wheel, I'll notice that I get very nice movement here. That doesn't mean that you can just start sewing with the machine, but it tells me It gives me an idea of, is it okay to move this without overly putting too much pressure and force on something? I do know that this machine was kept indoors all of its life. Was probably bought, I'm going to guess, 1959-ish or so. And it belonged to the same person for 60 years. And anyway, I got it. And again, as I've shown some of you in other videos, when you get a machine home, instead of just plugging it in and say, hey, let's see if it runs, I really recommend that you don't do that. You want to kind of do a gentle inspection for movement. So for example, when I first got this and I turned this little flipper lever, it moved. It did not give me any resistance. Now I'll notice that, for example, it turns, I'm starting to turn it down, and it should go up higher, but it's giving me resistance right about here. What that tells me is it moves pretty well, but not well enough, because that's what a reconditioning or restoration of a machine involves. So what I will be doing is I will be investigating. This machine has a removable lid, and of course I'll be going in looking at the backside to see what metal pieces probably need to have some old lubrication removed, new oil put in, or grease, depending on the kind of mechanism it has. And again, I'm just this is like I'm sort of doing like a health checkup on the machine before I start even overhauling it. I don't really need to see if it runs because I bought it, right? And I couldn't really inspect it from when I bought it. And even if you're buying a used machine, this is something you can do before you pay for it. Let's say you go over to someone has it listed, or you see it in a thrift shop. You can do this, and it's a good way, because if you're testing a machine and it's just been sent into a thrift shop after sitting for 30 years, you don't want to damage it. Now, again, these machines are extremely well built. So you might wonder, well, if they're so tough, then why are you telling us to be careful? Because these things sometimes have sat for a long time without use, and you will just be extra careful. For example, the stitch length control moves, but it's very stiff. It moves, but the stiffness tells me, okay, why don't I just wait? I'm going to go inside. I'm going to, there are two screws here, so this little piece is removable, and there is a screw in the side of the dial here that will come out, and I'll be able to remove those very carefully. And then look behind, because again, there's a metal-to-metal mechanism that sits behind all of these sort of decorative plastic pieces. These are fine. These pieces, the fact that these little covers are plastic, there's nothing wrong with that at all, because these are normally, when the machine is maintenance, they're not under a lot of stress, because the machine is not using this to turn the drive shaft. But just with your own human hands, you could easily damage it if you just go crazy with it. And sometimes I see people online and I see their videos and they're just smacking things around. Just be a little respectful. If this thing's 60 years old, built like a tank, yes, but remember, it's been asleep, and I get the feeling it's probably been at least 20 years, if not 25, since it had any use at all. And that's okay, but again, we need to be gentle when we wake these machines up. And then once we get them moving again, then you will see just how tough they are. Down here, we have yet another little logo. Let's see if I can zoom in here. I'll try to give you guys a close-up of the arrows. You see the little logo here, and then there's another one down here. A lot of Japanese machines from this period. What they have, it says precision built zigzag. Sometimes it will say Precision Deluxe. It may even say that somewhere on here. It's called the M-29Z. And even in this logo, there's like a little shape of a knight's armor. It's just they're doing their best to make this, to wow customers, to get their attention. And again, it has a very nice heavy hand wheel here. Everything is all metal. Of course, except for the little knobs on the front, and that's okay. We've talked before in other videos, I have mentioned how these knobs are going to be perfectly long-term durable as long as they haven't been damaged. And when you go to get the machine, before you start really cranking and turning, you've got to go inside and see what's going on. We need to wake up the all-metal components that are behind here to prevent damage. That goes for the reverse, right? For example, when I push on the reverse button, it wants to push, but it's stiffer than it will be when I'm finished. Could I just push it all the way in? I could, but that's not wise, because there's a rebound spring that pushes this out. So again, a lot of times if a machine has been messed with, often somebody went up to it and tried to make it do something it wasn't designed to do, or they just found something that set for 20 years and started, putting it through its paces without giving it appropriate amount of time to wake up, as I like to say. So it comes with its own foot pedal. This is the original foot pedal, and it's kind of interesting because this foot pedal very likely is the original one, and it's in a color that is not exactly the same, but that's part of the history, because eventually things that were made in Japan would be outfitted with electricals in Japan for the North American market. But in the first decade or so after the Second World War, the Japanese would create the heads of the machines, and this is one of the clones that you hear people talk about. When it was sent over, often you wouldn't see a label, right? You wouldn't see the label or the little logo plates at all. They would be sent over, and then they could have different labels put on them for the different department store chains that they were being sold at. Let's see, of course, we have a bobbin winder on the front. That is spring-loaded. Spring works really well. Beautiful mechanism, even after all these years. And up top, let me change the angle here just a bit for you guys. Of course, like a number of Japanese machines, it has a collapsible spool pin. And I've had to restore these before. Sometimes you'll get a machine and the pin will be stuck. It'll be down and you can't get it out. But if you go underneath the lid, you take the lid off, you should be able to go in and get that mechanism loosened by cleaning old gooped up oil, if that's the situation, and simply putting more oil. And they work fine. Again, you don't want to force them. That's the kind of thing, I know I sound repetitive sometimes, but I really want to emphasize. Be gentle. They're tough machines, but they've been asleep. So let's be gentle as we wake them up from their long naps here. This machine has a really gorgeous 1 amp motor, and the belt feels, I haven't actually, yeah, I can tell the belt is actually dry rotted. It still works, but if a belt is dry rotted, I typically, I always change it because, it's an easy thing to switch out. And if you leave old belts, now, if you have an older belt, it may have been replaced in the past. If it's not dry rotted, that's fine. Keep using it. No need to waste it. But if you take the belt and you bend it, and little cracks sort of smile at you, it's time to replace. Belts do not cost a lot. Belts on these machines are very easy to replace. I think I've demonstrated that in one of the Japanese white machines in the past. So if you continue to use the old belt, what you'll find is the belts will shed, right? As their rubber and whatever else they were made of starts to crumble. So again, you want to be, it's worth changing out. And again, it's very easy. These rear-mounted motor belts are pretty simple to change out. And of course, I have an option here to go into the side of the machine, and I'll be able to access the pressure bar and the needle bar to make sure those are clean and lubricated. And that's where the little light bulb is hidden. A lot of the Japanese machines, the ones that were made in Japan, not all, there are exceptions, but many of them you'll see the light hanging here inside. And I'm pretty sure, not absolutely sure, but I believe a lot of the Arrow and the Morse machines, Morse brand machines, were made by Toyota, which was one of many companies trying to jumpstart its revival after the Second World War. Of course, Toyota would become a lot more famous for its automobiles eventually. But yes, they did make sewing machines, and I believe this is one of them. The weight and the quality of the machine is incredible. But again, you might say, well, why did you buy this? The primary reason is that I wanted to offer machines with zigzag. Many of my clients want machines that are straight stitchers. And it's everything from quilters, fine gown sewers, and then you have people who want to sew really heavy fabrics, even garment leather. And very often, a straight stitch machine is all they need, and straight stitch machines are very powerful. But other people really need a zigzag, and when they do, I don't ever want to be without. Sometimes I'm without a zigzag, and now zigzag machines sometimes, depending on their condition, take longer to overhaul because not only are you reconditioning the vertical movement of a straight stitch machine, but then remember the needle bar is going to swing as the as the stitch width on the zigzag mechanism is adjusted. And that can take longer to overhaul, right? You have a machine that's designed to do more and it has more to recondition. And that often is what is indicating the price that is charged for the machine has to do with the hour and the hours of labor that I have to invest in them. Because it's almost always about labor. Occasionally, it's very unusual. I have to replace a motor or I have to get something that's costly to buy. Most of the time, it is simply, some machines take less time. So now there are other Singer featherweights, Singer 301s, Singer 201s I charge more for because the 201s in particularly when they take longer to overhaul, and there's a very strong market for those machines. But not everyone needs a straight stitch. Some people want a zigzag, and if you can't find a necky or find a necky in good shape or someone to restore it, you can often get Japanese-made machines that do straight, or sometimes like this one, they do zigzag, and they don't cost very much. Many of them were made, and so for example, one of the things I checked when I got this machine is the check spring. It's a nice, strong check spring. And I have another machine I'll be showing you guys in the purchasing series I just got. It's a straight stitcher, and I did inspect it, and its check spring was broken. I believe I have a replacement that will work for it. And even though it was a broken check spring, I was willing to purchase it because, they were not having a ridiculous demand in terms of their price, and I was pretty sure I could fix it. And it's a great machine. I don't like to see machines go to waste if I think I can practically overhaul it. One last thing to mention is some of these machines had two different buttons to control the feed dog. You could drop the feed dogs and do darning if you wished. Now, these are, of all the mechanisms that can get stuck on machines, these are probably more apt to be stuck than any other. And the reason is very few people ever use them. They had it set where the feed dogs were up in the position. They seldom sewed delicate fabrics where they would lower it to a mid-tier height if that was possible. And almost no one ever used the darning attachments. And so when you look underneath one of these, of course, there's a mechanism here that controls the feed dog raising and lowering. And they're all pretty similar. And what happens is they were oiled at the factory, and I can see the discoloration, and it's just old oil, right? It's going, if I force this, I might be able to get it to move, or I could also damage it, particularly the little buttons up top. So again, getting a machine cleaned, getting it lubricated, warming it up, literally sometimes with a hairdryer, depending on what needs to be reconditioned. By taking your time and doing it slowly, you can bring these powerful machines back without any damage at all. And you don't want to do that, right? You're investing your time and your effort. So there you have it, guys, the Arrow Stitch Master, and it is one of the most flashy looking machines I've ever seen. And I think they're fun. A lot of 50s design, you sometimes hear it called mid-century modern. There was a lot of optimism in the economy in the 1950s. The economy was booming for many people, and manufacturers of all sorts of product categories, they did a lot of sort of embellished and bright and loud designs because people were confident and they were willing to invest in things, and they were drawn to all the sparkle. But behind all the flash and sparkle is a really strong Toyota machine. So you guys will be seeing this again. I will be doing a video when it's done. It'll be called, of course, it comes under the debut series, when it's ready for sale. So if any of you have any machines that from the 50s, almost all of them have some kind of embellishment, share it with us down there in the comments. Let me know if you've got one of these 1950s Japanese-made machines, what you love about them. And like I say, put it down there in the comments. And stay tuned. I will be going in and overhauling this Stitch Master, and we'll get it ready and hopefully find it a new home. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more videos to come.